last major section of Ezekiel, and we're going to start seeing more promises, restoration, God restoring the fortunes of His people. Not only the people, but also the land that are going to be from here on in. We'll eventually get to the description of another temple, because the temple that was in existence in the days of Ezekiel was shortly thereafter destroyed. And it was rebuilt to some degree after the 70 years passed. And when Zerubbabel and Ezra, when they came back to the land during the Persian Empire, the Medo-Persian Empire, and then Herod the Great, once again, he continued building on the temple, and then it too was destroyed. But Ezekiel talks about another temple, and we'll get to that later. But tonight we'll get to the point where God is actually going to do something absolutely remarkable. We've already seen a glimpse of it many weeks ago. It's going to settle in on it tonight, where what God is going to do in His people and among His people and I mentioned, I think some time ago, what we're going to be looking at tonight, eventually when we get to it, is really the backdrop of John chapter 3. Jesus is talking to Nicodemus. He talks about being born again. He talks about the Spirit. It's like the wind. There's kind of wordplay going on there, since the words are the same. The Spirit, no one knows where it comes from or where the wind goes, but you experience the impact of it, or the experience of it. And as Jesus talking to Nicodemus, he didn't get it. And Nicodemus finally says, well, how can a man be born again when he's old? And Jesus, somewhat marveling, said, you are a teacher of Israel and you don't understand basically what I'm saying? He should have. Why should he have understood it? Because Ezekiel prophesied it. That's why. So let's go ahead and pick it up, and we'll begin looking through this. The first number of verses in chapter 36 deal with prophecy to the mountains and also to the land, as God is commanding, as we see in verse 1, now for you, Son of Man, prophesy to the mountains of Israel and say, O mountains of Israel, hear the word of the Lord. And then he goes on, thus says the Lord God, because the enemy has spoken against you, aha, and the everlasting heights have become our possession. And what he's doing with a number of these verses right here, it is just after the people of God had been removed from the land, they've been carried off into captivity, surrounding nations began to kind of swoop in. And the prophecy is focused on that is not going to remain the case. We can drop down a little bit further about the mountains. They hear the word of the Lord in verse 4. And then down in verse 8. But you, O mountains of Israel, you will put forth your branches and bear fruit for my people Israel, for they will soon come. Now, remember the context of while this is going on. Ezekiel, along with a good number of Israelites from Jerusalem area in Judah, they are now in southern Babylon. They're there. They're captive. Now, the remaining individuals before the final fall of Jerusalem, there were anticipating a short duration of this exile. And many of the exiles also were thinking about a short duration. Yes, they're displaced out of their homeland, but they're going to be able to come back really quick. Ezekiel says, it's not going to be like that. You're going to be here. And that's part of the judgment before. Now, a contemporary of, their lives overlap, of Ezekiel is Jeremiah. Jeremiah's prophecy, among the prophecies that he gave, he was telling the people that they were to Number one, understand that they're going to be in exile. And when they get to the country that they're going to be living in, they need to build houses, plant vineyards, because they're going to stay for a while. And then actually, he even gives a number. 70 years. 70 years, the land was going to lay just forsaken, barren. It was going to be uncultivated for 70 years. The reason for that is because the people were to observe the sabbatical years. They also were to celebrate the year of Jubilee. They did not do that. At that time, land was to revert back to the original family. Debts were to be given. Servants that were either had volunteered to be slaves, or those that were slaves were to be set free. And all that was to take place in the year of Jubilee. They never did do that. They've been in the land, for a number of years, and it ended up being, when you figure it out, 70 sabbatical years had passed, and they had never done that. So the land was going to rest. Oh, also during the sabbatical year, the fields were to be uncultivated. You let the land rest too. No record of the Jews ever doing those kind of things. So God was going to make sure it took place, and it did. And then the people were going to be able to return. Now, Ezekiel, the thing about what the promises we're going to get to now, they're still yet future. But what the promises are indicating is God has not forsaken His covenant with Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And then, of course, the covenant with Moses and the people during the Exodus period and beyond. God was not done yet with them. But if you remember back, part of the prophecies that we ran into from Ezekiel was the glory of the Lord departing from Jerusalem. First, His presence, His glory, moved from the Holy of Holies to the outer skirts of the temple, and then out the eastern gate, and then on the mountain, which would be across the way, which would have been the Mount of Olives, that area. So the glory of the Lord departed. Now, when the glory of the Lord departed, that it was simply because of the apostasy of the people, the idolatry of the people. So, but the thing of it is, God's glory is going to return. Along with that, God is going to fulfill His promises to His people. Here's the first one, as He was talking about. But you, O mountains of Israel, you will put forth your branches, and you will bear fruit for my people Israel, for they will soon come. They're coming back to the land. We'll get to more about that in just a little bit later. We pick up now with verse 10. I will, still preaching to these mountains, he says, and I will multiply men on you, all the house of Israel, all of it. And the cities will be inhabited, and the waste places will be rebuilt. I will multiply on you man and beast, and they will multiply and be fruitful. And I will cause you to be inhabited, and you who were formerly, and will treat you, and I will treat you better than at first. Thus you will know that I am the Lord. So there is this promise of restoration, that God is not done. It continues. And I will cause men, my people Israel, to walk on you and possess you, so that you will become their inheritance and never again bereave them of children. Thus says the Lord God, because they say to you, you are a devourer of men, and a bereaved your nation of children. Therefore, you will no longer devour men, and no longer bereave your nation of children, declares the Lord. I will not let you hear dishonor, from the nations anymore, nor will you bear reproach from the peoples any longer, nor will you cause your nation to stumble any longer, declares the Lord God. To summarize all of this, and I'm moving kind of quickly through this first part because of the focus is on proclaiming or prophesying to the land, that there's going to be this major restoration, that this country that was once inhabited by God's people will once again be inhabited by His people. And there's a lot that goes into that. But it's really interesting. I'm just going to give you, I mentioned this probably some time ago. It is amazing, literally amazing, what has transpired in what we call the land of Israel from 1948 to the present. It's amazing. It's amazing when you see things that they have done, things that have been accomplished. It's just so much. I mean, when you're driving, you know why they call the Dead Sea, right? Because everything is dead. I mean, it's dead. Well, when you're moving down toward the Dead Sea, it is a desert region. It gets just very few inches of rain a year. It's very arid. And I remember years ago when I came across the idea in Israel of when in the Bible talking about the wilderness. Only wilderness I was familiar with was woods. It ain't so there. It's nothing. It's just dirt and rocks. It's a wonder anything can even survive there when you look at it. It's just kind of amazing that anything can survive there. Well, anyway, I'm getting ahead of myself or getting behind myself. I don't know which. When you're going down, literally on a bus, going down to the Dead Sea, going that direction, you're in this arid area. Guess what you see? Fields of growing things. And someone told me this. I didn't get out and examine this. But the Israeli farmers have discovered ways of actually watering plants from the bottom. And that keeps down the evaporation. And their computer is computer controlled. So every plant gets exactly the amount of water every day that it needs. And you go down and you just see these fields literally in the desert. The desert is blooming. And not only that, there is something else that took place recently that was somewhat surprising. And what it was is I was watching this program. This gal, she gives you tours of different places in Israel. I can't think of what it's called now. It's Israel with she's got a Hebrew name. I can't remember. And she's still speaking Hebrew, so they dub her voice, so her lips and the words don't match. So if that bugs you, you got to kind of look off a little bit. Okay. But anyway, she takes you in one of these tours. You have to they take her to go to the Dead Sea. She shows you all of this around the Dead Sea, and up in the northern part of the Dead Sea, she shows you something in the Dead Sea that hasn't been there before. Fish. Fish. Actually, now there's no, Ronnie, there's no big bass in there, but there are like minnows swimming around in there, so kind of a change, kind of a surprise. I don't know if that means it's going to continue that way or not, but anyway, what I'm saying is the land has once again become alive, and there has been migration back from all over the world of Jews coming back to Israel. And you'll find people from all kinds of different nationalities. Our guide was talking about, now when you see these guys with these, wearing black clothing, black jackets, and these big bushy hats, do you know what those are? Say they're Jews wearing black jackets and big bushy hats. don't get think, because they've migrated from Eastern Europe. So they bring, there's a lot of them migration. People don't even speak Hebrew. They speak other languages. In the temple area, when he's going to go to visit the temple, there was a young man there that was born in New York City. And spoke very good, even for a New Yorker. He spoke very good English. And he was one of the tour guides to take us around. It was quite fascinating. How long have you been here? Well, he'd been here for like 10 years. He had immigrated back to Israel. Because his parents are Jewish and his grandparents were Jewish, and he felt like that's the place for him to go, even though he got dual citizenship. But besides all of that, there is the promise that God is saying it this way, thus you will know that I am the Lord. Now, we've run across that phrase several times, but we're going to see it again. We're going to see it again, that thus saith the Lord, that they will know that I am the Lord. Now, we move into 16 and following. There is, why were God's people removed? Why did He judge them? Why were they carried out of the land of Israel to a foreign land?
Idolatry.
Yes. Now this is where it gets very important for us to notice. We sometimes say things like this, or we imply it as evangelicals. We're saved by grace alone, through faith alone, in Christ alone. And no argument there. But what people end up doing, or people professing to be Christians, is they don't connect their profession with their lifestyle. Dr. C.W. Scudder, he was our ethics professor. And Dr. Scudder was talking about, he came to Midwestern Seminary from Southwestern Seminary. While at Southwestern Seminary, he was talking about, as was dealing with ethics, of course, he was dealing with a story that took place, or an account that took place with Southwestern Seminary. Southwestern Seminary needed additional student housing built. And so they were taking bids from different construction companies. Well, the construction company that gave the lowest bid was a construction company owned by a deacon of one of the Dallas-Fort Worth, one of the churches there. He was one of the deacons there. Well, he got the contract, he got the project, and after all these student housing was built, it wasn't within a short period of time, just a few years, they're starting to have to spend a lot of money on repairs. And so Dr. Scudder was one of the ones who was in the administration at that point. And they called this man and they asked him, what's going on here? And they had already found out that what he had done is he had used inferior products. That's what he had done in order to keep his profit up and his costs down. So that's why he was falling into disrepair. And when he was asked about, why did you do that? We assumed you were going to be using good materials. And this is what he said. This is according to Dr. Scudder. This is what he said, something to this effect. He said, what I do on Sunday and what I do on Monday have nothing to do with each other. Sunday's church, Monday's business. There's a problem. There's a major problem. Now, I'm not saying the man wasn't saved. I'm not saying anything about his spiritual condition, other than there's a big problem. And the problem is going to be addressed right here. Let's look at it. Then the word of the Lord came to me, saying, Son of man, when the house of Israel was living in their own land, they defiled it by their ways and their deeds. Their way before me was like the uncleanness of a woman in her impurity. Therefore I poured out my wrath on them for the blood which they had shed on the land, and they had defiled it, and with their idols. Also I scattered them among the nations, and they were dispersed throughout the lands, according to their ways and their deeds I judged them. Now we'll finish in just a moment. Okay, God is just simply laying it out there through the prophet. Why did they end up being judged? Why were they now living in a foreign land? Why had God, in essence, His glory departed from Jerusalem? Because of their ways and because of their deeds. That's a big deal. Wait a minute, that's Old Testament, right? We live in the New Testament era. We're into the New Covenant. Well, we need to be kind of slow to simply disregard Old Testament passages because they happen to be in the Old Testament. This is why God judged them. And there's more at stake here than simply the idolatry of the people. That's serious. Not only, we talked about the blood that was shed, in the days of Manasseh, there was times of child sacrifice. The abominable things before the Lord. And their almost ceaseless desire to worship all the pagan idols. Now, and God judged them for that, but there's a reason for that. And this reason is very applicable to us today as well. So what do I mean by that? Look at verse 20. Then they came to the nations to which they came, and they profaned my holy name, because it was said of them, these are the people of the Lord, yet they have come out of His land. And then verse 21. But I had concern for my holy name, which the house of Israel had profaned among the nations where they went. There's the bottom line. Let's deal with that for just a few moments. But I had concern for my holy name. What does that mean, you think? What do you think it means, a holy name?
Above all names, above everything.
Uh-huh. Okay, good. If I say something like this, Mr. So-and-so, he's got a good name. What do I mean by that? Reputation. Reputation. That our behavior patterns, our deeds, our ways, they have an impact in some measure upon the reputation of the God we profess to serve. The watching world, they will gather what we actually believe about God, not simply by what we say, but also by what we do. And God's reputation is a part of all of that, His good name. Now He adds a word to here that we often struggle with, and it's this: but I had concern for not just simply my reputation. There's an adjective here. Holy name. Holy name. That God is concerned about His holy name. So if God's people who profess to be the people of God are not a holy people, what kind of reflection does that have on God's holy name? It's bad. I don't know if I can get the quote right, but in a book titled "A Severe Mercy," I think the guy's name was Van Auken that wrote the book. I think he said it's something to this effect. This won't be a direct quote, but it'd be close as I can remember. He said something to the effect. Said one of the best testimonies for the existence of God is when God's people are graceful people, and he used a couple of other descriptive words about them. That gives God a good reputation because his people are that kind of people. But when they're vindictive and judgmental and etc., like some other kind of words, he said that's when Christianity dies 1,000 deaths. And he's got a point. Both Old Testament and New Testament. Our lives have direct relation to God's reputation. Not just His reputation, but His holy reputation. Okay? Make sense to you? Now, I'm not saying we have to be really legalistic and all that kind of thing and have all these rules that we need to follow. But, just in our everyday kind of experiences, do our lives somehow reflect something of the nature of God? Something that would indicate to other people that, it's kind of like this. This is quoting another professor, New Testament prof. He said, when you look in the Sermon on the Mount, when Jesus said, "Let your light shine before men, that they may see your good works and give honor or give glory to your Father who's in heaven." He said, he kind of boiled it down and said, what he, at least in one application of that verse, that when people look at your life and my life, they should conclude that God must exist because there's no other explanation for that person. It just doesn't. Just doesn't. That we're just not like everyone else. Now, in some senses, we are like everybody else because we're human beings, right? But we're not just like everyone else. I remember this preacher had preached a sermon on honesty, and he's a bivocational pastor. No, he wasn't. He was. I forgot what church it was. It was a large church. Sometime, in past generations, really. And the next day, he was going to board a bus, going somewhere. So he boarded the bus. He paid, he paid the fare. And he got the change back. And he went and sat down in his seat. He got to count his change back. And he realized he had too much change. So he said, my lucky day. He kind of thinking to himself. Then he got to thinking, no, I don't think so. That's not right. It's not my money anyway. So when it came to his stop, he went back up and he stopped to the bus driver and said, "Here, you gave me too much change." And gave him the change back that he had given him. He said, "Okay, Pastor, I thought so. I was in that church yesterday and I heard your sermon. I was just going to see if it's the real deal or not." So you got to be careful. You might get tested on some of that kind of thing. Might get tested. So anyway, now in verses 22 and following, this is the portion that you probably understand that I'm kind of skipping to get to. Because this is the passage that Nicodemus should have been familiar with. What God was going to do. There are some very important, we could spend a long time talking about the different points of these verses. Because something is going to be mentioned here that is also looking into the future, but it's not devoid of the past either. And you see what I mean in just a moment. "Therefore say to the house of Israel," verse 22, "Thus says the Lord God, It is not for your sake, O house of Israel, that I am about to act, to which you have come. Now, God is just laying it out here. It's not for you, though it's going to bless them. It's because of my holy name. You have profaned my name among the nations, my holy name, and it's for the sake of my name that I am about to act. So what is he going to do? Verse 23. I will prove the holiness of my great name, which has been profaned among the nations, which you have profaned in their midst. Then the nations will know that I am the Lord, declares the Lord, when I prove myself holy among you in their sight. So when you look at the Old Testament, God's choosing of Abraham and then his descendants Isaac and Jacob, and then Jacob's 12 sons, and as the nation grows, God makes a covenant with that nation. The covenant to Abraham first, Isaac and Jacob, and the follower and Jacob's sons. But then on Mount Sinai, God not only renews that covenant, He makes the covenant with the nation itself. And somewhat surprisingly to some, it's a marriage covenant. That may help you when you come across the prophets, when you have all of these images of when God's people are chasing after the idols, why the idea of adultery and the violation of a marriage covenant is one of the figures of speech that's used to kind of help us understand what's going on there. It is. And in Jewish marriage of yesteryear, there was this coming of understanding the terms. And that's what the Ten Commandments are. These are the terms for you are to obey. These 10, these are the terms. And the people said yes. They would abide by those. And that's why the Ark of the Covenant became a central feature in the temple in the Holy of Holies. Because there was the covenant, the agreement. And also the lid of the Ark was also the mercy seat. Why? Underneath the mercy seat, under the lid, was the what? The Ten Commandments. The 2 tablets were there. And so when the high priest came in sprinkling the blood on the mercy seat, the blood was covering the covenant. And it was about the Ark of the Covenant. That's why. Okay. What's going on in this sense? God chose a people. And this people was to be the people through whom God would bless all of the peoples of the world. Basically boiled down, because of the covenant and the choices and the lifestyle and everything of the people of God, it was to announce to the world, do you want to know what the people of God look like? Here they are. Here they are. No, they're not just like every other people group. There's certain kind of things they avoid. There's certain kind of things that they do. There's a God that they worship. And they are a reflection in their expression of worship of who that God truly is. And the same thing is applicable in the New Testament. The pagan world around us, they should be able to look at us as Christians, as believers, as followers of Christ. They should say, that's what the people of God look like. That's why we are not to be just like the world around us. I hope that makes sense to you. It goes more, obviously. Verse 24. And I will take you from the nations, gather you from all the lands, and I will bring you into your own land. Prior to 1948, from AD 70 to 1948, that was always a struggle, trying to understand what does that mean. If you look at some of the commentators of yesteryear, prior to that, they were somewhat struggled trying to say, well, I know what it says, but I don't know how. Because the Jews have not had a homeland for nearly, not quite, but almost 2,000 years. They have been displaced all over the earth. And in 1948, in May of 1948, with the United States' insistence, now the Jews once again had a homeland. And what happened at that point was there was immigration back to Israel. And it's been going on, off and on, ever since. What does God say through Ezekiel is going to take place? Now, I'm not making predictions. I'm not putting a time frame on what God's future plans are and when and how and all that thing at this point. I'm not saying that. I'm just simply saying that this passage, this verse, has been fulfilled. To some degree, at least. They've come back. They've come back. And though I didn't come prepared to do this, we could talk about a lot of what has taken place in Israel since that time. But now, let's move a little bit further. Verse 25. Then I will sprinkle or splash clean water on you, and you will be clean. I will cleanse you from all of your uncleanness and from all of your idols. Now here's the question. Who is the one exhibiting the action here?
God.
God is. God is doing this. He is going to sprinkle or splash them with water. He's going to cleanse them from their uncleanness and from your idols. It's something that God's going to do. Moreover, I will give you a new heart and put a new spirit within you. And I will remove the heart of stone from your flesh and give you a heart of flesh. So what's going on here? Well, they have stone hearts. The imagery, I think, is very important for us just to consider. They have stone hearts. We might call hard hearts or something along those lines if we're talking about it. Now, for one, what does it mean, heart? We use that metaphorically and also literally, don't we? We have an organ in our chest that's called, what do we call it? Our heart. Which is, maybe I'll talk about this in just a moment. I want to tell you about a strange phenomenon. If you talk, I don't know about women per se in this respect. I do know about men. When a man has bypass surgery, where a surgeon is actually touching his heart, after the bypass surgery, many times, I can't say every time, but many times, there is a change in that man. He's more emotional. Even if he's not emotional before, or doesn't show emotion before, he's liable to be emotional. And I've always wondered about that. And this is just just an anecdotal story of my own experiences. I've noticed men, especially men, that when they have something done to their heart, where actually their heart is being touched by another person, it does change them somewhat. I don't say for the long term or anything like that. I don't know. I haven't followed people or anything like that. But there is something that takes place there. I remember when Dr. Cole had bypass surgery. The man could not get through a class without crying. Called him the weeping prophet. Well, actually, the weeping professor. But he just couldn't. Just stunned by that. Stunned by that. He really could. Everything was so much. I don't know. My dad had bypass surgery. I saw, not major differences, but I saw a bit of a difference in my own dad. And I've seen other men over the years. I'm not saying anything other than that. I don't know. Just something takes. But let's talk about we'll get back to the heart. I'm not talking about the physical thing in your chest like I just got through. I'm talking about what does he mean here? Well, it's you can understand this in several ways. One, it's a seat of emotion. Usually, that's referred to in the Bible as your kidneys. That's where the seat of your emotions are. But you can see why that probably doesn't translate good into our culture, especially on Valentine's Day. I love you all my kidneys. I don't think that worked very well. But anyway, back here. I think the main focus is your mind. That's the problem. That's where you make your decisions. That's where you're inclined toward this uncleanness and inclined to go toward the idols. So God is going to take that stone, that hardness, and He's going to replace it. Do you remember years ago? This takes you back to my high school days. I remember a fad where you could get pet rocks. Anybody remember pet rocks?
Yeah. Sure.
Now, pet rocks were pretty popular because they're easy to take care of. You don't walk them. You don't have to let them out. You don't feed them. They don't bite. But they're all boring, aren't they? I mean, they're useless.
Why are they all gone now?
Yeah, they're just useless. The people are like that. These hard-headed their mind, these people being hard are useless before God. Because they're just constantly rebellious. They're constantly seeking their own. And remember, God's holy name is at stake. So God's going to do something about it. He's going to do something. He's going to take that stone and replace it with something else. With flesh. Pliable. Responsive. Something softer. And you can begin thinking about, Nicodemus, why didn't you understand being born again? Or being born from above? Because there's going to have to be something that's going to be supernatural here that takes place. He's going to have to remove that heart of stone and give you a heart of flesh. And verse 27, and I will put my spirit within you and cause you to walk in my statutes. And you will be careful to do my judgments. Do you see the issue of being born again here? I mean, really, what's going to take a person from doing his own thing to now wanting to do God's thing? I mean, what's going to result in that? Something has to take place. That's why we're talking about, the issue of being born again is so important. Because we can, if we try to get around that and minimize it, or you'll find even Christian groups today, or professing Christian groups today, that don't even talk about being born again at all. They just don't. It's not really even on their radar or even in their vocabulary. But it means there's this transformation that takes place in a person's life that God Himself does. That's being born from above. Being born from above. And Jesus even uses the imagery of water in that passage. And in John 3. He uses that as well. And here is what God Himself is doing. In verse 28, and you will inhabit the land that I gave to your fathers. So You will be my people, and I will be your God. Moreover, I will save you from all of your uncleanness, and I will call for the grain to multiply it, and I will not bring famine on you. Verse 30. And I will multiply the fruit of the tree and the produce of the field, so that you will not receive again the reproach of famine among the nations. Then you will remember your evil ways and your deeds that were not good, and you will loathe yourselves to your own faces for your iniquities and your abominations. And I am not doing this for your sake, declares the Lord. Let it be known to you. Be ashamed and feel dishonored for your ways, O house of Israel. And now we're going to switch gears there. Again, you're going to remember back. And you're going to be able to come to the place, I can't believe I actually believed that. I did that. I lived like that. You know, this is just observation on my part. Used to, we would have, more testimony type opportunities within Sunday school classes, worship services, prayer meetings, where people would give testimonies about certain things, what God's doing in their life and that kind of thing. We've kind of gotten away from that. We probably should return to some degree to that. But one of the things too, that's been somewhat fascinating because of, I guess, the fallenness of our own hearts. We like to hear, and sometimes we like to talk about those pre-Christian days. Almost you almost get a sense of longing is there. I remember this was a different professor that was talking about, he was in his church, there was a revival service going on there. The evangelist, the preacher for the revival that week was a man. He opened up, talking about his giving his testimony. And he spent a lot of time on before being converted, before he became born again, his life there. And it was pretty wicked. It was really wicked. Now, on the one hand, it's great that God could save a man that was that wicked. So you get encouragement that way. But Dr. Dutiel, he was talking about, he was walking out after the service, two teenage boys, probably, 15, 16, 17, I don't know. They were talking. One turned to the other and said, "Oh, I wish I had a testimony like that." And Dutiel stepped right up between them and says, "No, you don't." Mm-hmm. Scared the poor kid half to death. He knows what the kid meant. But no, you don't. No, you don't. Yes.
We have a family friend. My kids and I have a family friend who all of her childhood years, terrible things in life that were not her fault. Then as she got older, then she created all of her own problems by the way she lived. 2 or 3 or 4 years ago now, in 3 separate encounters, both my daughters and I had lunch with her without anybody else, just me and her, and them and her. And we all came away going, she's a different person. We don't even know her anymore because of what the Lord had done in her. An entirely different person. That's what this makes me think of.
Well, it should be that way. It doesn't mean you have to have such a bizarre, wicked past to be an effective Christian. Really, you shouldn't. Because hopefully haven't experienced things like that. But God is the one that does this. He's the one that does this. And what was going to change in this people is he's going to give them. I kind of glossed over in verse 26. He's going to give them a new heart and put a new spirit within them. And then in verse 27, he tells us what spirit he's talking about. His spirit. His spirit. You know, if you and I walk with the Lord, and really, if our desire is we want to please Him, we want to live a life that is one that we will not be ashamed on the day of judgment when all of our works burn up. That we won't be ashamed that I didn't do more for you, I didn't live more faithful to you. If it's our desire to be pleasing to Him, though we won't be perfect, we can't be, not yet. But if we do have that desire, anytime we quote step out of line, God's Spirit gently lets us know. And He doesn't do that because He's wanting to judge us. He's doing that because He wants us to respond back. And that's what the old timers used to say. You know, keep your sin list short. Keep it short. Regularly visit with the Spirit of God to, search me and know me and reveal if there's any harmful way within me. Because I don't see it. I really don't see it. All of us have our own, like the blinders you put on horses to keep them going. We have things that we just don't notice about ourselves. And one of the things about our individuality anymore, we're kind of the John Wayne types. We're not open to a brother or sister to gently helping us see where the chinks in our own armor truly are. Because sometimes we get really offended. Who do you think you are? Now, there are people that think they're fruit inspectors and they want to inspect everything and straighten you out, and that kind of thing. I'm not talking about those kind of folks. But so we just don't see. We don't see everything. Yes?
What way does the Jews returning back to Jerusalem today come with the Spirit? That is, are these Jews Christians? Are there a mixture?
Well, that's where we're getting into the area of future things. If you, quite frankly, if you go to Jerusalem today or Tel Aviv and begin talking to Jewish people, the majority of the people you're going to see there are not. They're not in any stretch of imagination Christians. They're not. As a matter of fact, they probably are more secular than anything else. That's what the current nation of Israel is. Now, there is a promise that one day, and I don't know when that day is, or necessarily every circumstance leading up to this day. There's going to be a day, according to Scripture, when Jews are going to return. Not every single Jew, perhaps, but in mass, acknowledging that Jesus Christ is indeed Messiah. That's going to happen. Paul even says that in Romans 9, 10, and 11, that about all Israel will be saved. And he's probably using a hyperbole, not every single Jew, but there's going to be a mass turning. And you see kind of glimmers of that from time to time. There are Jewish people that are basically embracing Jesus as Messiah. And there's Jews for Jesus, and there's a host of other groups that you'll find. What's the barrier? I'll say this real quickly, and then we'll wrap it up. What's the barrier for Jews coming to Christ? Well, for a number of years, it's because of Christians. because of the anti-Semitism, which is starting to grow again among Christian groups. But that was one of the barriers. Another one of the barriers has to do with a lack of really understanding of what it means to be a Christian. A Jew in Israel, I'll just use an example of our guide. Our guide was a very, very knowledgeable man about the life and the ministry of Jesus. He knew more than most preachers know about the life and the ministry of Jesus. He's Jewish, and he wasn't he wasn't concerned being around Christians or anything like that. But anyway, Tara asked him the question. His name's Moshe, which means Moses. Moshe, why you know so much about Jesus? Why don't you believe in Jesus? That's the question she asked him. He says, I do believe in Jesus. He believed in the miracles. He believed in a lot of the things about Jesus. But this is what he said. He said, to be a follower of Jesus, you become a Christian. And no longer are you a Jew. He did not understand, because of his culture, that you can be a Jewish Christian. But to him, it was you had to leave one in order to embrace the other. He had a mentality. This may be helpful. I don't know. As Muslims do. You don't have Muslim Christians. When a Muslim becomes a Christian, he or she now is a Christian and no longer a Muslim. You see? And the Jewish concept there in Israel, at least, seems to be very similar to that. Very similar. Well, thank you for tolerating that. Now, next week, what about some dry bones? Okay? Who's going to come and say that the leg bone's connected to the knee bone and all that? Who's going to sing the song?